Welcome to this explainer. When most of us hear the word Nepal, our brains just automatically jump to snow-capped peaks, maybe some colorful prayer flags flapping in the wind, and trekkers making their grueling way up to Everest Base Camp. But to view Nepal merely as a trekker's paradise, well, that is barely scratching the surface. We're talking about a nation with a history and culture as deep and honestly as complex as the tectonic plates that literally pushed it into existence. So today, we're going to look right past those picture-perfect postcards to explore the incredible, tumultuous, and deeply fascinating story of Nepal.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've got 5 key areas we're going to cover today: the roof of the world, ancient dynasties and unification, the road to republic, a tapestry of cultures, and we'll wrap it up with the modern economic challenge.
Part 1. The Roof of the World.
To really grasp the reality of Nepal, you have to understand its placement. It's completely landlocked, sandwiched right between two absolute giants, India to the south and China to the north. Geographically speaking, I want you to picture a massive country-sized staircase descending from north to south. Up at the very top step, you've got the Greater Himalayas, steep, rugged mountains, and freezing alpine conditions. Take a step down and you land in the middle hills, this temperate terrain full of deep valleys and slopes. Step down one last time and you hit the Terai region. These are the flat, fertile lowland plains that basically act as the country's grain basket. Now, this stacked geography is absolutely stunning, for sure, but it also physically isolates cultures, drastically dictates the climate, and, as we're going to see later, creates some towering barriers for modern infrastructure.
Actually, to really wrap your head around the sheer, immense scale of that top step, the Greater Himalayas, consider this single number: 8. Nepal is home to 8 of the 10 highest mountain peaks in the entire world. That includes Sagarmatha, which is most widely known as Mount Everest. And these aren't just giant pretty rocks in the sky, they are literally the water towers for the region, feeding colossal river systems like the Ganges.
Moving on to Part 2. Ancient dynasties and unification.
Let's step back in time and see how this builds. Because long before any modern borders were ever drawn, this rugged landscape was governed by some powerful ancient kingdoms. Starting way back around 500 BC, the Kirati people established a majestic early nation. Fast forward to the 7th century CE, and the Licchavis coup over the Kathmandu Valley, kicking off this incredible golden age, where gorgeous Hindu and Buddhist temples first began dotting the landscape. Then, by the 12th century, the Malla dynasty arrived on the scene. They eventually split into smaller kingdoms, but they sparked an absolute renaissance in stone and wood architecture.
So for centuries, Nepal wasn't a single unified country. It was this complex patchwork of principalities, but that changed. And changed rapidly between 1743 and 1779. King Prithvi Narayan Shah, who came from the rugged Gorkha region, launched a massive military and diplomatic campaign. He systematically conquered and unified the Kathmandu Valley and the surrounding areas, essentially forging the modern kingdom of Nepal under his Shah dynasty.
Those Shah kings held the reins until a really brutal turning point in 1846. It's known as the Kot Massacre. In a totally vicious power struggle, the royal family's loyalists and the elite nobility were just wiped out. A man named Jung Bahadur Kunwar emerged victorious from the bloodshed, establishing the Rana regime. And for over a century, the Ranas ruled as absolute autocratic prime ministers. They kept the country completely isolated from the outside world, while the actual Shah kings, they were reduced to mere figureheads, basically confined to their palaces.
All right, Part 3, the road to republic. Talk about a roller coaster. The late 20th and early 21st centuries saw Nepal awaken from that long isolation, but it led to an incredibly volatile timeline. In 1990, massive protests finally forced the monarchy to concede to a multi-party parliamentary democracy. But that stability, it just didn't last. By 1996, a decade-long civil war erupted, led by Maoist insurgents. Slap bang in the middle of all this fighting, in 2001, the entire nation and the world was stunned by the tragic assassination of the royal family. The new king, Gyanendra, eventually tried to seize absolute control, but that completely backfired. It triggered massive civilian uprisings in 2006, which ultimately paved the way for a brand new federal democratic constitution in 2015.
You really have to underscore the historical weight of that 2006 mass movement known as Jana Andolan II. This wasn't just a simple shuffle in government. This was the people of Nepal successfully abolishing a centuries-old monarchy. Literally, in a matter of weeks, an ancient kingdom was transformed into a democratic republic.
Which brings us to Part 4, a tapestry of cultures. Now, with all that intense political chaos, you might expect a completely fractured society, right? But actually, religious harmony is one of the most defining characteristics of Nepal. The vast majority of the population practices Hinduism, but Buddhism is deeply, deeply entrenched. If you walk through the Kathmandu Valley, it's incredibly common to see spectacular Hindu shrines and massive Buddhist stupas like Swayambhu and Bodhanath literally standing side by side. The communities share festivals, and in some cases, they even worship the exact same deities just under different names.
And the people themselves? They are this incredible ethnic mix of Indo-Aryan and Mongoloid roots. And it maps beautifully to that geographical staircase we talked about earlier. Down in the flat Tarai plains, you have the Medici, Tharu, and Yadav communities. Go up to the middle hills, and you'll find the Pahadi, Magar, and Gurung peoples. And all the way up in the high Himalayas, the Sherpa, Bote, and Tamang communities thrive. Every single one of these groups has its own dialects, its own vibrant festivals, and its own traditional dress. There's this fantastic quote that says, Nepal is historically known for attracting the be-all, end-all artists, craftsmen, and building the prosperous principalities. And that is so true, especially in the Kathmandu Valley. During the Malla period we touched on earlier, the kings of the different principalities didn't just compete in warfare, they competed in art. They aggressively patronized stone and metal masons, turning the valley into this vibrant nursery of extraordinary architecture that you can still see today in the stunning Durbar squares.
Finally, Part 5. The modern economic challenge. So the crucial point here is this. We have a country with breathtaking geography, a rich, ancient history, and a totally vibrant culture. Yet despite all of those riches, Nepal remains one of the least developed countries in the world. Get ready for a jaw-dropping stat. 29%. That is the approximate amount of Nepal's entire gross domestic product that comes purely from foreign remittances.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how extreme that reliance is. When you compare Nepal to its massive regional neighbors, places like India, China, or Bangladesh, their average reliance on remittances is somewhere around 5.6%. Nepal is hovering near 30. Think about what that means. It means a huge portion of the nation's youth is having to leave the country to work abroad, sending money home just to keep the local economy afloat. Yes, it's a critical lifeline, but it completely exposes how fragile the domestic market really is.
It's a classic paradox, and it becomes crystal clear when you weigh the assets against the barriers. On one hand, you have immense untapped wealth, world-class tourism potential, vast water resources perfect for hydropower, and priceless cultural sites. But on the flip side, the barriers are, well, literally towering. That same gorgeous mountain geography makes building roads and infrastructure unbelievably difficult and expensive. Because of that, they rely heavily on imports for basic goods. And, of course, those decades of political transitions have often pushed long-term economic planning completely to the sidelines.
So right now, as we speak, Nepal is caught in this massive development struggle. The 2015 constitution was a monumental achievement. It swept away the monarchy and set up federalism. But transitioning to a democracy hasn't just magically flipped a switch for rapid economic growth. The natural and human resources are still largely sitting unutilized at home, and the country is still searching for that sustained political stability it desperately needs to finally harness its own potential.
Which leaves us pondering this final thought. Nepal has survived everything. Shifting tectonic plates, autocratic regimes, devastating civil wars, and massive political upheavals. The sheer resilience of its people and its culture, absolutely unquestionable. But as we look ahead, the big question is, can Nepal leverage that ancient, undeniable resilience to overcome its geographic and political hurdles and finally forge a prosperous modern economy? It's going to be a fascinating journey to watch unfold. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring the incredible story of this nation.